only virtually. Have you ever driven through a roundabout? Probably, as they are becoming quite commonplace here in Quebec. I remember taking one for the first time in Paris, where there are up to 7 or 8 concentric lanes and oh so many exits to choose from. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the frustration traffic circle, about learning how to manage frustration, anger. Anger or frustration are difficult emotion feelings to deal with. Stress, sadness seem easier to understand and to manage. Frustration, however, is something that feels sometimes almost shameful to experience, as if it wasn't right to have such a feeling. Frustration in itself is a completely normal and healthy feeling. It only becomes problematic when it channels into aggressiveness. The frustration management model I'm going to talk to you about was created by Gordon Neufeld, who lives somewhere in Western Canada. Mr. Neufeld came up with this tool as a way to help his nephew deal with the death of his grandmother. Instead of going through the usual sadness associated with the death as a loved one, Mr. Neufeld's nephew withdrew into himself, refusing to talk, and he started to skip school. He was resisting the fact that he was in pain, and he was redirecting this pain and anger at himself instead of expressing it in a healthy way. Resistance is how a lot of people will react when they don't know what to do with the emotions they're experiencing. Instead of trying to get away from our emotion, simply recognizing them for what they are can help to bring down the tension. Okay, I'm angered. Okay, I have frustration. And then to start adapting to the new situation in our life. The traffic circle illustrates the way we can work with frustration and the tension these emotions generate in order to eventually evacuate them. When you enter in a roundabout, you necessarily have to go right, don't go left. You'll get into more trouble as like when we drive. So going right with the frustration at N, I head toward the first exit, the exit that will lead me to change. Is there something I can change in my life that will help me to deal with this frustration? For example, if I've been having problems with my partner that trigger frustration, I have the power to bring about changes in my relationship. I can therefore take the change exit and do what has to be done to resolve the situation. This applies to a lot of things in life. Either I change something on myself, on the environment. But if I can't change anything to this situation, I hit a wall, powerlessness, or as Mr. Neufeld called it, futility. In the face of what's happening, the change exists is blocked and I can't take it. I have to continue my journey in the traffic circle. That's when I come to the second exit, adaptation and acceptance. So I ask myself, what can I do live through this situation differently? Can I talk to someone? I can have a good cry. I find a way to express what I'm feeling in order to help me to deal with this frustration. Here's an example. I'm going through a breakup. I'm really mad because I wasn't the one who called it quits. And my partner refuses to consider his decision. I go into the roundabout and come to the first exit, change. I try negotiating with my boyfriend. Oh, let's give another chance. Why don't we go on a romantic weekend to patch things up? I promise I'll change, I'll be more in tune with your needs, etc., etc. If my partner's decision is final, however, the change exit is blocked by the wall of powerlessness. I'm faced with only one solution: pick up my sorrow and frustration and head towards the second exit. I take this exit and let myself live the grief associated with losing my partner. I find ways of coping with the situation. I call a good friend to talk about what's going on. I exercise. I give myself some leeway to deal with the extra pressure. I allow myself to see and name the sadness and anger for what they are, and I endeavor to live through them. But what happens if for some reason I can't manage to take the adaptation and acceptance exit? I again hit a wall called resistance or defended against my vulnerability. This is normal reaction, as we've seen in video 3 with our Arctic fox human reflexes to resist when we feel threatened. However, when we don't want to live the emotions associated to this situation, we can change. We resist and we are then stuck with this baggage of anger and frustration that we are carrying. That's something that happens very frequently. And the roundabout here clearly illustrates what goes on in such case. The famous social worker Brené Brown wrote a book entitled The Power of Vulnerability about this concept. It is so well written, and it illustrates brilliantly how vulnerability is not something to hide or to be ashamed of, but instead to be proud of. Something that can help us get through. Mr. Neufeld helped his nephew unlocking his vicious circle in telling him proudly, "Honor your grandmother with your tears." Let me give you another example. Let's say I didn't do very well on an exam. I'm furious at the fact, and I think that I deserve a better grade. I can take the change exit and go see the teacher to try to have him reevaluate his decision. But if the decision is final, I'm faced with something I can change. So the change exit is blocked with powerlessness, so I have to continue on the second exit, adaptation. And I must accept what I'm faced with. If I decide to take concrete, positive steps to avoid being faced with just a situation in the future, such as work harder, plan my work better, ask more questions, I will automatically deal with the anger and frustration I'm feeling. If, however, I am compelled to resist my emotions and refuse to acknowledge my vulnerability, I'm forced to continue on the traffic circle. And by the way, experience in coming to terms with vulnerability is what makes us human. It's completely normal and even desirable, since it opens up to your our self and to others and leads to the compassion. So, if I'm refusing to take the adaptation exit and continue my path in the roundabout, I come to the third and last exit, aggressivity. Notice that there is no wall to potentially block this exit. You automatically go in. Once we've taken this exit, we can go in one or two directions with our anger and frustration luggage. If we choose the first direction, we'll redirect this anger and frustration towards ourselves. We could experience guilt, we could sabotage ourselves, cut ourselves off from the ones we love, maybe resort to alcohol, drugs, deal with the pain. Some might even go as far to self-harm or even resort to suicide. This is the most extreme form of aggression towards oneself. Note that there are many ways to undermine yourself, and many of them may seem harmless at first glance, But the sum of these attacks, however, is always destructive, since we cannot evacuate or transform the anger and frustration we're experiencing into something positive for ourselves. Such behavior will lead us right back into the traffic circle with more intensity, and will go around and around as long as we don't take the appropriate exit. If we take the second direction and the third exit, we'll direct our anger and frustration towards others. This can lead to verbal attacks, intimidations, rumor spreading, and it can escalate to attacks to others' property or even a physical attack. This direction illustrates how important it is to learn first acknowledge frustration, then manage it with the right exit. I'm really sure that many people who have committed acts of violence, like prisoners for example, are simply people who have not learned or have never had a chance to learn how to deal with these troublesome emotions. And what if they could learn how to? So this traffic circle model clearly illustrates that three choices exist we have when dealing with frustration, particularly the second exit, the one where we can accept the inevitable and adapt to it in order to transcend anger and frustration in our lives. I hope that illustration has been helpful to you, and that it will help you to face situations where you don't have the power to change things, only the possibility to deal with the emotion you feel. Indeed, life doesn't go always as planned, and in most cases, not all, but that's okay. Time often allows us to move on as long as we find a constructive way to deal with anger and frustration. Have a great day. Hope to see you soon.